Hello! Well, let's catch up on that suspense from last time and see how Jun's attack is gonna go. It seems like an odd choice to go on the offensive considering how his troops are in not terribly great condition right now. But the thing is, regardless of how the enemy deployed their troops, only half of it would be difficult targets, the sort of thing that fought back. So I felt I could probably handle it. Okay, looking pretty fair so far. So why did my rapid fire only hit one of the two squads? The answer is that they pulled back their infantry immediately after those guys' rapid fire. That's the sort of move that I wish I had thought of. And it looks like this guy is not even bothering to shoot at my AFW because, hey, my troops are hurt, this is their chance to finish him off. Seems fair. Fortunately, my recon were able to get a shot off and finish their supply before their AFW got a chance to load a shell. So I'm actually in pretty good shape now. They have what I believe is an APCR shell loaded, so I don't especially care if they fire that right now. But they didn't. And considering that, dodge is not a bad choice. Although if I was really thinking, I probably should have tried aim weapon. Because with their supply squad gun, they can't repair it. At least, not during a battle. Then again, that would be 2 maximum attacks in one fight, and it isn't incredibly necessary right now, so I don't feel too bad about that decision. What I am curious about is why I bothered moving backwards for a second. And I'm really curious about why I shot at their AFW instead of their troops. Well, okay, I did get the weapon hit anyway, so that's not too bad, but I'd still rather finish off the infantry. That wrong target thing strikes again. Still, I can't complain too much about what happened here. The only problem is that they still have that infantry squad which has shrapnel, and since they're low on life, they're gonna be in crew next time, which could cause problems. Manual error. Don't you hate it when that happens in these strategy games? Well, Cansado definitely needs some time away from the front. And since he doesn't have a supply squad or even any mechanics, it's gonna take a while for him to be in shape for fighting again. Now, this is a consequence I didn't know about because I wasn't sure what squads the 4-leg AFW had, but this is a serious problem because they put wire up front and they have APCR shells loaded. So because of that wire and my lack of cleanup, because for some reason I chose one of the 1 or 2 mechanic squads without cleanup, I will not be able to escape the battle. I'm going to be stuck in place as soon as they have time to move their squads forward. And for that reason, I decided to move forward rather than backward to take some of the sting out of their APCR. Also, at medium range, I'll be able to at least shoot back at their squads a little bit. It's still gonna hurt, of course. But it could have been worse. Also, I don't think I'll be able to wipe out their squads just with a gun because they have hype morale. It's the only skill that particular infantry squad has. But it's pretty effective against a setup like mine. Also, their supply squad is gonna hit me back a couple of times, which will help keep me in optimum range for their shots, so that's actually, well, it would be a decent plan, except I can't actually be knocked back while I'm stuck in wire. Oh, I didn't think I'd be able to get to short range in a situation like this. Also, I've been thinking about the use of check fire, and I think the best time to use that will be when I'm fighting an anti-AFW with Jun, because that should be able to keep it in one place long enough for me to get some good troop shots. Or squad shots, whatever. The technical term is versus soldier fire, I guess. Even though short range is not the best for this kind of enemy, given the enemy accuracy I've encountered so far on this map, I didn't want to take an extra chance. Because, well, look at my health. Well, look at his health, but still. So it doesn't look like Jun did much except get hit a few times, but the damage he dealt to their infantry is going to have consequences pretty soon. Of course, since Kinsado is in the back line, someone has to take the enemy attacks, and this time it's Ryoko. And that's where I started to regret giving her an anti-AFW setup. Which is a weird phrase to use when anti-AFW is also a type of machine, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to say, right? Well, Ryoko isn't that great at running away either, and she doesn't have to walk that far to start shooting enemy squads, so I figure I might as well do something. Also, both of those enemies have gas neutralized, so my tear gas shells will not be so effective. Thankfully, there are no explosion-proof gas masks, so I still have something to do. I also discovered something about flash shot, which is when both squads have flash shot, one will wait for a while before, the second one will wait for a while after the first one takes effect, and the reason for that is it has a temporary effect on your aiming speed. So when the first flash shot's accuracy effect wears off, then the second one will fire it. Still not what I'd call an optimal setup, though. Now, what I do find interesting is having both squads with flash shot and then rotating it, like have a diagonal setup. Or, well, start with them both in back, of course. Move one forward, fire a flash shot, then switch the two of them and have one fire the shot while the other recharges it. And if you time it right, you might give the other side a lot of trouble loading any shells. That's not what these guys did, though, so no worries. Also, while I prefer that Ryoko stay relatively intact, I prefer her to handle enemy special shells, because she actually has the best armor of anyone on my team. And she also has a bunch of squads that are good at repairing in this setup, so I'd say it works out reasonably well. That was not a whole lot of experience for that battle. Well, that's because these enemies are lower level than the ones in the previous map, which is pretty weird. I mean, they're both supposed to be loyal army. I don't even know what subunit to call them. Well, both of these encounters are supposed to be with the Loyal Army, but they don't seem to be the same people, is what I'm trying to say. Well, this is a good chance for Ippei to take that village to the lower left, and who knows when more enemies are going to appear down there, so I better be quick about it. Oh, right. So, this is something that you might have noticed before, but it's going to get more blatant as the game goes on, which is, as you walk to certain spaces, enemies will trigger. More and more often, these trigger points are going to be village that you need to capture in order to get squads. I know that technically more enemies mean more experience for fighting enemies, but it still feels like a punishment. Alright, so here's where I run into the consequences for my accidentally leaving that infantry alive. As expected, they loaded up the shrapnel, which means Emilio can't safely move his supply squads forward. There is a backup plan for just this sort of thing, though, which is, well, I brought heat shells with them for a reason. So, if things work according to plan, I can fire a heat shell and then move forward to finish the enemy with a punch. Now, because these medium AFWs are basically giant blocks of armor, the remaining health is still kinda high, especially since Emilio's punch is weaker. However, I feel like there's still a chance at finishing them off because one of his maximum attacks increases his punching strength. So let's go to it. Also, I was able to fire and then move forward and punch without them firing back because their weapon was broken. Well, looks like it was not quite there. Almost, not quite. What do they have? 2, 3 health left? Yeah, 2. Alright, so even with Rapid Punch, Emilio is not as impressive as Ippei with the close combat fighting. And that leaves an awkward question of who's going to finish them. Well, it's not Ayana because she has more important things to do. Now this is where the good consequences happen. You see, as I mentioned, that particular infantry squad has no special shells, whereas both of the other 2 squads have special shells. But the AI wants to protect that infantry, so we're in a pretty good situation here. Soldiers are all, or I should say, infantry squads are also not the best at loading shells, so I should have a pretty decent advantage here. So the bad news is I'm going to be taking some pretty accurate shots from the enemy because long range is their specialty too. The upside is I'll have no trouble taking full-powered shots at their soldiers, which is more important as long as I don't get knocked out in one encounter. Also, I forgot to speed this animation up. I'm very sorry. This is one of the longer animations, too. I shall endeavor to do better in the future. The wire didn't even affect the battle at all. Or, that's not quite right, because it actually helped me a little bit. It cuts short the setup animation of Forelegs. Well, it affects the animation of all AFWs, but since Forelegs have the longest setup animation, it benefits them the most. So if you aren't actually aiming to close in on a 4-leg AFW, be careful with that wire. Well, now this position is a good place to use aim weapon, except I forgot that Ayana is not level 11 yet, so she doesn't have it. Such a shame. It doesn't especially matter that the enemy moved their engineers back, because they won't be able to avoid a snipe no matter what they do. So even if they were still up front, the correct move would be to just shoot at the enemy AFW. For a fun little bit of homework, compare the number of enemy shots fired to the number of shots I fire in this battle. The result should be interesting. That's the difference that squads make in crew. Now, if I had only taken AFW shots, I would have destroyed them completely in one encounter. I still stand by my standard procedure of removing squads first. But, oh, that's the level that I was talking about. Alright, aim weapon is really nice as long as the enemy doesn't have repair, especially for Ayana, because you've seen how she takes a lot of shots with this setup. So if the enemy doesn't have repair on their ground units, she can disable their weapon right at the start and considerably reduce the damage that she takes during the battle. Now here's a tough decision. So we have an enemy with 2 health left. Who finishes it off? Who can afford to take that move? After all, I definitely want to remove that foreleg before they go after Jun again. But I still felt like I should do other things with Weizsäcker right now. Especially since a green squad is on the line. So while he's in a perfect position to finish them, it's still better to just pay attention to the turn order and have Weizsäcker do other things. It turned out that Jun would be able to move before the 2 health AFW did, and the other 2 people, Ayana and Emilio, would either of them be able to finish off the foreleg. So that works out. And I'm glad something works out, because I'm going to explain to you in this encounter why it's important to bring anti-armor squads with you when you want to finish off medium AFW. Well, any AFW, but especially for medium. First of all, depending on the range that's best for your AFW, they might help keep the enemy in place or knock them back if you're a long-range thing, right? And neither of these squads can do that. And the other reason, well, even if you've removed the enemy terrain advantage with recon, well, this has nothing to do with it. They'll fire APC shells regardless of what your squads are. However, even if you zoom into pretty good accuracy, you might miss. I was afraid that he would close into short range. I've actually seen that happen before, because the AI can tell when it's better at short range than you are, even if it isn't super optimal for their AFW type. You might miss twice at good accuracy. And they're clearly not missing. So he missed 2 of his 3 shots. Okay, granted, that's an okay shot, but... The thing is, having anti-armor squads on the ground is impervious to bad luck. It is supremely reliable, and we've just seen a display of how important that is in this game. That is a huge increase in aim correction. Maybe he noticed a problem and is working to correct it. A little bit late for that encounter, but I mean, we're not even halfway through the missions, and John's aim is still a. I beg your pardon. I was so impressed that I actually threw myself off. We're not even halfway through the game, and John's aim is absurd. I can only guess at what it's going to be like towards the end. So I don't even need to make Jun fire. I can just move the engineer squad forward and have them take 1 shot. Who even cares if they take a shrapnel hit? It's not like I put them on the ground a whole lot. Although, I did land the shot. That's pretty okay. And Jun is going to need that experience because he's going to take a fair number of turns recovering from all that fighting. So that bit of recovery is why it helps a lot to remove both enemy squads in one encounter. Because if that had not happened, and instead they had any wounded squads, we would have lost the potentially capturable squad in that village. But because oh, this is an interesting question. They actually are weaker than they normally are. I love how these details are actually shown in the gameplay. They could have been lazy about it, but they weren't. Now this is going to... I guess that's it for this video. We'll see how the next step plays out next time.